Yo, what's up, guys? And finally, I bring you guys the ultimate soloist Mistfall Hunter tier list, and we'll be explaining everything down to the ground as precise as I can with all the experience I've gathered and testing off stream, on stream. Everything will be explained from counters to non counters, and we'll be comparing each and everything in the tier list. Why it's in the certain position in the tier list. And yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, thank you so much for being patient with me, guys. As it took me a while to make this tier list. Why? It's because I've been playing and I have basically played every single thing, every single class in the game. I've fought every single class at the same time. I had to gather all these experiences and so that I can give you the most credible and accurate tier list that I can possibly create for you guys. But guys, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I poured a lot of hours into thinking about this tier list, and as I said, I played mostly every class. I fought every class, and this will be uh my biggest share for you guys for a tier list with the most credible and precise information that I could share. But guys, starting with Mercenary, we're gonna be starting from weakest to strongest, and our weakest class and our first and only class that we'll be putting in 1.5 is Mercenary. Okay, to explain, this class is very weak, and one of the reasons why is because first and foremost, the class is very slow. So in game, right, when you fight this class compared to any other class in the game, its skills are, as I said, very slow, very predictable. It does deal a lot of damage, right? Because it is a slow weapon, and slow weapons usually deal a lot of damage when they're super slow, which could be good in trios. But the fact is that we are playing solos, and in solos, you will be focusing more on, uh, your 1v1s. And frankly speaking, when you are taking your 1v1 fights, compared to other classes, this weapon is just much more reactable compared to other classes' weapons or skills. And you know, uh, I'm not saying that you can't die from Merc Hammer, but if ever you do struggle or lose to this weapon, that's mostly because you're getting cheesed. What does that mean? It means that you're getting cheesed of the knowledge that you have not played against, right? You have not played enough uh, versus hammer players, which means you just don't know how to react and you don't know how to counter it. It may seem very strong as it can spam a lot of super armor moves. I have seen some people complain about this, and actually, some people even think Mercenary is like broken, like hammer, right? But like it's mostly just a knowledge gap. I can promise you this, guys. Once you guys play enough versus this class, you will be able to punish it accordingly, and it's very easy to dodge once you figure out the moves it does. So give yourself some time. I would consider this class a very huge cheese class. I will say though, it will have some niche matchups. What do I mean by niche matchups? That just means you will have some matchups that you will actually be good with. But so far, honestly, the only good matchup that we'll be dabbling about more later on, because I'll be showing all the counter matchups and matchup winning matchups for all classes later. I will dabble on, but I'll just be pointing this out so we're clear on this, that Mercenary does have one good matchup, which is gonna be unironically Withered Knight, Polearm, and Greatsword. But yeah, we'll be talking about that later. Or if you guys want to skip it, it should be like I should have put it in the timeline for YouTube if you want to check that out. But yeah, overall summary for Mercenary Hammer, guys, it's a very slow weapon for solos, very easily reactable once you've properly put enough hours in fighting and learning this matchup. It's very easy. So I hope you guys understood that. There's really not much to be said about hammer. It's a very simple weapon. But yeah, moving on, we're gonna be going to the second weakest class. Although I am not saying that this class isn't viable, which is why we're putting it in the viable position in number 1. And even though it's not the strongest class right now, uh, Black Arrow has always been, guys, a class that you would want to put for players who want to put in all the hours to learn all the map positioning, areas, and, you know, just being a class that you will be mechanically putting through yourself, like, to win most of your fights. So, in summary, you are a class that needs a player to play very well, and that is one of the factors why this class, you know, isn't highly placed in the tier list. It used to be very strong, or much more stronger, but because of the nerfs and because of majority, it has been toned down a lot. So what does this mean? Well, for my opinion, last few patches or previous patches, this class was very highly rated, even being put in S tier in most tier lists. I did not make a tier list as I was so calculating and experiencing everything as much as I can before I give proper input. But from my opinion, from the last patches, I think the reason why this class was very strong was, one of the factors was a lot of new players were coming in and they did not know how to properly fight against barbed arrow. Uh, Basically, this class has a move where, like, if you hit someone, you can't dodge, and there was a lot of cases where I've seen where, like, people just didn't know how to dodge and properly interact and how to use their dodges when they are getting shot by this arrow, and they would just die and, you know, like, fall over very easily. As new players, you know, it is very easy to get cheesed by knowledge, and it is very frustrating, I can agree. Range classes are probably the most frustrating in these types of games because you do have to get near them before you can do anything, and usually these classes have really good utility, which is understandable. I will not take away, though, the class did a lot of damage and it has been toned down way more. And yeah, people have been learning how to play against the class as of now, right? The class has shown clear weakness, and as of the nerfs, it has been toned down a lot, as I said, which makes it very hard to play the class. You have to put in, again, a lot of hours and, you know, a lot of practice into your aim to learn good positioning, what to do in situations compared to other classes. You just have to wait to do way more, and I think that's perfectly healthy as a Black Arrow class. This class is by no means unplayable, just a very hard class, and that's what how, you know, we want Black Arrow mains to be, right? It will be kind of like putting off mostly the casual players, which makes sense. What I just mean about casual players are people who, you know, don't want to really invest much time on classes and just want to play for fun. So yeah, this class, yeah, most of the time and most of your experiences, this will vary on the player, obviously, and how fast you learn. But yeah, this class will usually take a lot of time, so it will make most casual players avoid it. But overall, this class is very healthy. You will still see a lot of good players with this class, right? But that doesn't mean yeah, this class is meta at all. It's been way more toned down. But yeah, definitely we'll still have good players. But yeah, we'll be putting Black Arrow final on number 1. Very viable class. Depending on how you play, could be crazy good, could be crazy bad. There you go. And for the next class, will be, well, not class, like weapon, I guess. So this won't be the representation of the entire class, guys. But yeah, to explain more, we're gonna be heading into Shadowstrix Dagger. So Dagger will be putting in viable. Okay, before I just start, with Dagger Shadowstrix. Normally, guys, honestly, uh, people don't really even use Dagger completely, as you have other skills for Strix for the other weapon, and you would normally just use that. But let's just say, right now, you are completely focusing on Dagger, and maybe you'll just be using dual blades just for, you know, some skills, which is fair. But the problem is, this class on Dagger, if fully just concentrated on with this weapon, is it just lacks very consistent attacks. And what that initially means is that when you play Dagger, you're gonna be relying on just two skills the entire time, uh, which is gonna be your flash stride and usually your other dash attack that does CC. You may have some variations with this, but in the end, it's gonna be the same. The way you play Dagger is like you just want to be spamming your Dagger skills. You want to have like very fast CDs, like probably running Seamless on this class, right? You just want to be hit and run all the time. That means you will never be really contesting most matchups like on a fair fight, on like, you know, just like spamming LMB attacks. No, you're gonna be mostly trying to hit your skills, and if you get a huge combo, you can one-shot someone, but like it's very inconsistent, and it's not really that, you know, it's not really the hardest thing to dodge, right? It really depends on how you play as a Dagger player and how good you are in using these skill shots. And this just matters a lot because, like, as I said, you are not really winning any matchups in your 1v1s. It's mostly just you like relying on your resets and trying to hit something that's very hard. And depending on the class, I would say that we'll be tackling later, most matchups, it's just not the greatest. Although it is viable, and I think your survivability, you know, because you'll be in the end using your other skills for dual swords. But yeah, if you're just saying like you're using mostly Dagger for attacking, you will still have some pretty good escapes, but overall, I think your kill potential is not the best because of the fact that of how much you have to rely on and hitting skill shots that are just really not the greatest things to do with Dagger for now. Bye guys, just pretty short summary for Dagger. Honestly, there's not much things to be said with this class, but yeah, it's a viable weapon to play. Just anything other than that, yeah, it doesn't change. But for the next class, and for the next class rather, we'll be having Withered Knight Greatsword. So for this weapon, we'll be putting as well also on a viable, right? It's definitely not the weakest class, right? You know, but at the same time, a lot of people struggle using this weapon, and the reason is because Withered Knight in general, right, it's just a hard class to play, and the problem begins where, like, aside from like being a hard class to play, some of its skills are just very lackluster. So if I would give like, what do you say, an example of why this class can be put higher in the tier list, is because you have basically something called a parry, but honestly at this point most people just rely on it as a block, not really a parry, because of the fact that when you do hit this parry, um, you can't really hit the parry attack. It's mostly just a zoning attack, and if ever you would ever hit it, it's because of just like really good timing or like, you know, a big mistake from the opponent, because it is not a true parry. What does that mean? If you hit a block slash parry, people can just dodge whenever they want. It is not a true combo. It just gives you a way to space yourself out and pressure opponents, but doesn't really give you how a parry should be working, right? So aside from that, right, that's gonna be one of your main skills that you'll be using for the Word of Night, unless you remove it. But yeah, even though it's not really the best parry mechanic or slash skill, I would say most people still wanna do run it for playing Greatsword because of the fact that it still does save you and you can pretty much block everything, right? Like it's not a parry for sure, like in the craziest terms, but being able to survive and just last longer will help you a lot using that block, and that's mostly what it's used for. And regarding its other skills and attacks as an entirety, yeah, it's also not really the craziest class for that. It has some decent dashes, but not too not enough to the point that makes this class very crazy compared to other classes. Because then again, it is a very hard class to play with its combos and how you interact with other classes with matchups. Most matchups will be a skill matchup. You will have some hardcore matchups. For example, you will be struggling against. This is very niche as well, you know, but this is one of the factors of why it's just not. It can't be just strong enough because you do actually struggle with Hammer Mercenary with this class because of the fact that they have more power over you because they can just legit patiently wait for you to miss an attack and just keep holding. It could be slightly of a skill issue too. I wouldn't say it's completely unplayable. It's just very hard. It's more of a winning match for Mercenary Hammer. But we'll be talking about that later. I just want to share a bit of ideas since we will have a separate talk for that later. But yeah, guys, in summary, Wither Knight is a hard class, a hard melee class, one of the hardest melee classes right now to play, and skills doesn't really offer, or at least compared to other classes, offer like uh, you know, crazy strong potential and is lacking in areas of defensive capabilities compared to other classes. But overall, it is a viable class. It's not the worst. You know, you will definitely see players in the viable position tier list for sure. Still like outdo other players, right? So yeah, that's basically it for our GS VK, and for the next one, which is, you know, slightly better than the GS VK, is VK Polearm. So if I would compare this, right? Maybe some of you might be wondering, why would you think Polearm is better than a GS VK? Good question. It's mainly because you have overall better skills than a VK GS compared to a Polearm. And the reason is because you have more dashes to help you close your fights and is just much better in terms of most of your matchups. And they actually give you a lot of super armor, right? You may not have a parry, but gives you a lot of super armor, and super armor in this game is really good, right? Which VKGS lacks is a lot of defensive capabilities and enough dashes to actually chase players. But yeah, it is very hard still, right? Even with the super armors and the dashes, you do not deal the craziest damage for Polearm. So you might be wondering, Dima, why am I putting VK Polearm just viable if it has a lot of super armors, if you say it's meta? Uh, yeah, the problem is that even if you do have a lot of super armors, you do not deal the craziest damage. It doesn't need a buff. I don't think it needs a buff because this class is just hard to hit. The damage isn't a big problem right now, in my opinion. The main reason why, even with super armor, this class struggles is it's just very hard, as I said. And mechanically speaking, if you've ever played Knight Polearm, your attacks are very linear. So technically, when you are trying to dash, right, that is something that you have to predict because people will dash at the same time, which is not easy in real-time fights. And even after the initial dash, when you actually get your charges up and do your level 3, level 2 thrust charges, it's very linear and it's just very mechanical to hit them, and like you can easily miss them in fights, which just makes even polearm very hard to play in solos, which is why you won't see as much players play the best with these classes. But as I said, guys, remember, yeah, hard classes like these classes will always have some really good one tricks that eventually you will see. this is why I am putting it in the viable position for this tier list. So worry not, with enough hours, I think with most matchups, as I keep saying, we'll be dabbling about matchup later. But matchup wise, yes, it is viable. You will have some counter matchups. You'll have some good matchups. In the end, very decent class, very viable class at least, right? And yeah, so far that's it for our Verdant Polearm. And then we have Revenant Seer. And this class will be our first class that will be in the 0 tier. It is a very strong class. And the reason is because this class is actually anti-dive, right? This is one of the factors why. And to explain what anti-dive is, basically you cannot just dive into this class, you know, as a melee class or even like as a BA. Well, we'll be talking about the counter matchups later. You do get countered by Sorc, but I don't want to over-explain on that because I said that we'll be having another talk about that later. But yeah, for most classes, for Revenant Seer, people cannot easily dive into you because of how much CC and insane damage that you have, and right, and defensive capabilities slash utilities when people dive into you. I am not a Seer main, and I would just want to mention to you guys, I am pretty lucky to have a friend to help me out. Shout out to her for helping me out, and you know who you are. But yeah, I would like to thank her for like telling me about Revenant Seer and as my experiences at the same time, because I have fought actually a decent amount of Revenant Seer, and with this combination, yeah, the experiences that we've had for Seer is that this class basically just excels in insane defensive capability when you are getting dive. So to look further into this, to share further into this rather, is that basically this class, let's say for example, you get dived by like a Parry Mercenary, it's mostly a gamble for the merc if you do not have any ways of actually getting your advantage of getting the first few hits. Most likely as a melee class you will die, more so if you don't have a class, if you're not using a class that can escape when you initially dive, right? So the class is really good at warding players away, and at the same time, because of how strong it is 1v1. It may not be the strongest, I just want to add this note. It may not be the best class for chasing. The class does not really chase anyone, but like the fact that this class just forces you to either just go in or watch it in the sidelines just gives you intense pressure to have more control over the battlefield where you're going. And it's really just easier to control that pressure as a class that you know that you are confident in that you will not get dive, right? The class absolutely stomps anyone who doesn't know how to deal with the wards, break the wards, or whatever they put in. It requires insane precision for melee classes to beat this class in 1v1s, as you will need to force yourself as a melee class to do insane risks, either wasting your CDs and possibly using your dashes. But yeah, we will be talking about the counter matchups and matchups later. But yeah, overall, because how the meta is right now, leading towards more melee classes, and how it's at the same time still very decent against range classes like BA, except for Sorc, that we'll be talking about later. The class proves to be really strong in the meta right now, and yeah, we will be placing it in 0 tier strong class. And for the next class that we'll be placing for the strong position will be Mercenary Parry, okay? Mercenary Sword and Shield. We will be talking about another variation of Mercenary SNS, which is like the LMB one. that I'll be spamming one, but we'll be focusing first on the parry. As you guys can see, I'm not putting it in meta. Some may argue that this class may be the best class in the game, or just a meta class, but let me explain to you guys why I'm putting it in just a 0 tier. Okay, first and foremost, guys, this will be a bit special since I think a lot more people are focusing on SS, and a lot of people are interested in how this class is. So I will be talking about the matchups and counter matchups in advance, although I'll still re-explain it later around the video. But yeah, to start with, let's give a bit of a background for Mercenary Parry. In technical terms, right, this class is the best 1v1 melee class, right? But there's a huge but. You have to be really good with your parries, which is very mechanical, right? And I want to clear this out. You cannot reaction time, and you are not reaction timing / spamming parry right into players, right? Although I'm not saying that in some cases you will pop off and have good reaction time and just do it by reaction. Sure. But parries are originally, and as a mercenary main myself, and I will tell you guys right now, it is more predictionary than reactionary, right? And the reason of me telling you guys this is to just let you know, as mercenary, we are not just spam right clicking and praying to God it works. No, because if you do that against a really good player, they will just wait for it and they can punish you. There is a frame that you can punish the parry. It is very fast, sure, but it is not a no CD parry. People must understand that no matter how fast it is, it has like around a second of parry to punish. And I know that sounds very crazy and very strong, but let me finish why it can't be meta at the current patch. It is strong, but it can't be meta. And to further explain is because we're going to be talking about the matches right now. Starting with your two main hard counters. Yes. Some people might even start arguing why Black Arrow isn't higher if you were countering one of the better classes in the meta, because as I'm gonna say right now, you are countered by a Black Arrow and a Sorcerer. So Black Arrow, I mean, as I explained earlier, is a skill issue class, and it does have some good matchups. And one of the good matchups of BA is Mercenary Parry, right? But I'll just like put this as a side note. I cannot put Black Arrow higher because of the fact that it just struggles more, and it is still a skill issue, right? So it's very hard for a Black Arrow to pop off, even versus a Mercenary, because there is still some counterplay for Mercenary. But in a really hard fight, Black Arrow is in a winning matchup, and the reason is because you are ranged, and Mercenary has a, well, you can say, struggles on chasing classes that have good movement, or even just by like good positioning. You can't just mindlessly go in because of the fact that, for example, Black Arrow, if you get hit by a barbed arrow, or even if you just get kited properly, right, and you only have one dash, right, you have only one shield bash. This may vary though. I will say it does get a bit complicated, but let's say if you like, just in this specific um situations, because I am explaining that this class is the best 1v1 melee class, and for that to be working, you would have to be playing Stonebreaker. Remember that. Just a bit of a side note, you can play something called Whirling Cut or something. I forgot the complete name, but basically it gives you like a dash attack that may work better versus ranged classes, but this will sacrifice your potential to be the best 1v1 melee class. And right now, one of the biggest reasons why this class could be strong, or you can argue, right, because of the fact that it is the best 1v1 melee class, right? And with certain builds, even then, if you don't run Whirling Cut, you can still run certain affixes that will help you play around range matchups better. But yes, as I was saying, guys, yeah, you will have matchups like Black Arrow, where you will just struggle, and you know, it adds up to the factors why I can't put this class on the meta tier list. But that's just one factor, right? Okay, let's give you more factors, because like, you know, it won't be the defining factor of why this class is not meta. So to give you guys more arguments and more explanations, for example, we're gonna use two examples here, right? Aside from being countered by a Black Arrow, right? Aside from it being a hard matchup, but yeah, sure, right? We do have the argument of if Mercenary plays really well and parries everything, right? You can still win, right? It's not the craziest matchup, but I would like to just like enlighten you guys in this specific argument, because a lot of people try to argue with me with this on stream, and it's just a very, you know, respectfully, obviously I'm not trying to put anyone down before I say this, but if you would like to argue and convince me at the least, right, the argument of saying if you are the best player in the game, this class can parry everything and win everything. So if you have heard me explain this a lot of times in stream, which most of you probably have if you watch me a lot, is that the problem with this argument is that you are not comparing the actual classes and strengths and weaknesses. You are comparing something not relative to the class and how we should base on meta. That means you are just saying it's a skill issue, right? And that means it depends on the player. And the main problem with this argument is that I can say that for every class, right? If, let's say, I am just the best player with Black Arrow, that means I can legit shoot you at so far from the map and just aimbot, like, and I would still win, right? It's just a very hard argument to use, or very invalid argument. I just want to put that out. So yeah, guys, the class has huge potential, and you know, even then, right? That's one of the factors that sure that I can agree that you know, I am placing it in strong tier, right? But you guys cannot necessarily completely base on, you know, having to be the best all the time, because that is not the best and proper basis on how to individually figure out the strengths and weaknesses of that class, more so if you want to argue in your tier list. But I just wanted to put that out. And aside from that, guys, we have to talk about another counter, right? So, because, you know, we are, you know, as I said, guys, we are talking about Mercenary, and he is a hot topic. So I have to give you guys the most, and we're probably gonna take a while longer explaining this class. But yeah, basically, yeah, Sorcerer is one of your counters aside from Black Arrow, with the same idea of it is a range class, and it's just very hard to close in with a Mercenary, considering you only have one or just like very few dashes, right? Even if you run Whirling Cut. But remember, guys, we are running the best 1v1 melee class pretense here, you know, so ignore Whirling Cut for now. We're using Stonebreaker, right? But even then, it's gonna be similar. But yeah, when you're facing a Sorcerer, right? Same with Black Arrow. I won't have to explain this much. It's the same thing. You get run over, but it's CCs, and even with not the best like builds, like even with Fireball, even with the Stardust, right? You will still get absolutely bombed if you don't play it perfectly. And what that means is, right, if you just walk up to these characters, BA and Sorcerer, you will immediately just die before you get near them, right? considering that you only have one dash. It's just a very hard matchup, and if you're a mercenary main or even if you play a BA or sword, you will notice this. So that's already two counters for this class, right? So you would start wondering, I mean, I hope you would start understanding, okay, if you think Merc is like a broken class as it seems to be, why does it have two big counters? But if that's not enough for you to convince me, to convince you from my argument, I'll give you more, just to be safe, right? Because this is educational, guys. Remember, guys, I just want to be clear. I just want to say this throughout every time. I am not putting anyone's opinion down or anyone down with what I'm saying. Clearly, this is my own set of opinions too. So, I will always want to like give you guys respect. Whatever you think at the end of this video, everyone's entitled to their own opinions and I respect it. So do not worry. And of course, voice out anything that's, that we can like, civilized way, like talking in comments or in chat anytime. But yeah, moving on, aside from that, right, from SS, there is more problems actually that the reason why I can't put this class on the meta position, and that's gonna be because of two other classes that we'll be talking about next later on that I will be considering meta. I think you guys already know, but like I will have to point this out. Early spoilers. Basically, when you're facing a Blasphemer out Shadowstrix, I'm just gonna summarize this because I don't want to take too long as I've already had with Mercenary, and this tier list is gonna be very long for Mercenary. But basically, if you have seen these two classes and if you played Mercenary or whether you haven't played Mercenary, you're gonna notice, sure, Mercenary can dominate and kill you much more easily in 1v1s, but that doesn't necessarily you counter them like completely. What does that mean? You may fight well against them in 1v1s because you are considered the best 1v1 melee class, but the problem is the game is not about 1v1s, right? It's about who can run the best and who can chase the best at the same time. And these two characters, which is Blasphemer Seer, Melee Seer, and Shadowstrix, right? If you're using dual blades, you cannot chase this class if played properly with a mercenary. So aside from getting hard countered by two classes, right? Or countered rather, right? Even if it's not a hard counter for some people who may believe that, right? You have two other classes that you can't technically kill and will have to rely on their mistakes to be bigger than yours. What does that mean, guys? That means that you have way less chances of killing them in fights and they have more chances of killing you because of the fact that what's gonna happen to you, which I've represented on my stream and videos, I would recommend watching them if you want to see how these fights go, is that I can literally just go in when I'm about to die, go out and do the same thing over and over and over to you as a mercenary, even if I lose like 10 times, right? Like, it is not hard as melee classes to run away. Chasing compared to running away will always be easier in that sense. And because of this fact, right? And there's one argument that, to prove my, logic, right? We can all agree Shadowstrix, right? At the least, is the best class of running away. And we've all been there fighting a Shadowstrix. Do you guys know how frustrating it is trying to chase that class? So aside from getting countered, sure you can fight an SS or a Blasphemer, but they will just outrun you every single time. They can chase you, you can't chase them. That means you will just eventually lose to them unless you just play perfectly as a mercenary. And remember, guys, that argument is invalid because of the fact that we are humans, right? So playing a class that can just come back and fight you every time will statistically and logically have have to be better in the tier list because of the fact that, you know, they can fish for your mistakes. Meanwhile, they can do whatever they want. And that's going to be why this entire tier list actually will be revolving not only because of 1v1s and because of resets, because the entire game is an extraction game. You do not have to win your 1v1s completely to be the best class. But yeah, guys, I hope those reasons have maybe changed your mind, and hopefully you've understood my reasoning as I've tried my best explaining with you guys. But yeah, guys, that will be Mercenary, and those will be the things that I've stated why the class is strong and why it isn't the strongest, like, you know, to explain to you guys. And I hope you guys are satisfied. We'll be talking about it more later once we tackle on the matchups. So yeah, no worries, more information about that later. And for the next one that we have, right, will be Elemental Sword. Okay, this is gonna be a bit of a special case. We're gonna be putting both Elemental Sword and Stardust Sword together at the same time, right? I'll be explaining these two guys together. So basically, yeah, Stardust and Elemental are pretty strong when played correctly right now. There will be a slight difference though that I would explain. As you can see, I put Stardust Sword behind Elemental Sword because Elemental Sword will still be better than Stardust Sword in terms of matchups and most matchups at the same time. But they are very similar to each other comparing to other classes. The main difference will be, I would say, is their 1v1s. If you haven't seen my guide for the new Elemental Sword build, or even Fireball, honestly still beats Stardust Sword in 1v1 even after the nerfs. So please to check that out. It might help you more in understanding what I'm explaining right now. But yes, this class is strong. One of the reasons is because you do, you know, as you guys can see, it correlates to how my tier list works. You do counter Mercenary, right? A bit of just a special example was BA. Even if you counter Mercenary, it just can't work because of how this class is stationed towards other classes. But yeah, to explain, right, aside from that, aside of countering a Mercenary, you actually play pretty well against most of the classes, which we will also include later on one of the meta classes, which is why this class could be or is very strong right now in this current patch. But yeah, just a bit of spoilers. We will be tackling this again later. You are and you will be countering Blasphemer in 1v1s. Blasphemer really struggles a lot versus Stardust Elemental. Whatever you play, as long as it's work, you do struggle. Maybe there will be some builds that you will struggle a bit more versus Seer, or makes it a bit more of a skill matchup. But yeah, as I said, we'll be talking about that later. All you guys have to know, it can counter some meta classes and like Blast, and it plays very well against most of the roster. And because of how Sork is, though, I can't be putting it on meta on the meta position because of the reason that this class is actually hard. Okay, some people might argue this, and yeah, that's fine because I know some people have been one-shotted because of the insane damage this class deals and says like, oh, you just spam. No, I would like to explain why the reason this class is hard and why it can't be meta. So one of our few things that we have to point out, it's similar to BA, although I wouldn't say BA is better right now because of how the meta is. But remember guys, this class is a very mechanical character. You need to aim, and more so, even it got nerfed, right? For example, for Fireball, you are dealing more damage if you are hitting direct hits compared to like AoE, since it has been nerfed. And for some builds, for example, my electric build, my lightning build, it is very mechanical. No matter what you play, even Stardust, sure, it might be easier because of the AoE, you still have to aim with this class, and everything that you can miss is just mechanically challenging. And the way this class design is that you have a lot of skills in your arsenal, which will require you a lot of hours to learn this class and get used to the situations when to use those skills. But once you do master it, this class can prove to be strong in this patch, right? But it is just really hard to put it in the meta tier list, as you are countered by one of the best classes as well in the game, which is just running amok at the same time in this current patch. But yeah, guys, I think I explained that pretty well, I hope. A pretty good summary. I think most of us, hopefully you guys understood what I'm trying to give for Sorcerer, as that's all I can say for the class for now. But basically, starting with Blasphemer Seer, guys, it works the same way as Shadowstrix. Okay, the way I'll explain this is I'll be talking through Shadowstrix to compare to Blasphemer, so that maybe it's easier for you guys to understand. But yeah, basically, guys, if you haven't seen Shadowstrix, or, you know, if you have, which I think 95% of us have seen in our solos games, because it's one of the best classes right now in the game in terms of just overall fighting and resetting, right? The class just has insane reset capability, which means that this class is always just running away, resetting, and easily does this with the set of skills it has, which are just very strong. For example, it has a TP and a lot of dashes, and at the same time it deals good damage. In fact, a lot of damage, right? So because of this, when people see us Shadowstrix, if they play really well, the class is basically untraceable for some classes, as I pointed out, like Mercenary. You just struggle to trace the class, and it can just keep coming back until you lose. And now to switch over to why I think Blasphemer Seer is strong, it's the same answer to Shadowstrix. You may not have as much dashes, but the similar mechanics or idea applies. And to explain, Blasphemer has two skills that pretty much makes you unkillable. And one of the skills they had that we'll be explaining first is called Shapeshift. So this class can turn into a ball basically, and you can just outrun anyone with this skill. You will be the fastest thing in the game with this skill. Obviously, if you do use this incorrectly, you will be chased, as any other class who messes up their skill, and that's just a skill issue, right? Obviously, so I don't want to spend too much like explaining about those mistakes, as we already talked about how it's supposed to be, right? How we're basing. But yeah, in terms of this ball, it's just insane utility, and what makes it as strong as the Shadowstrix is the second skill we're going to be talking about, is its super armor called Zeal. And yes, I do main this class, and I have proved, at least showed everyone how strong this class is and how much of a moneymaker it is in my games. Basically, Zeal, like, normally it gives you around 8 to 9 seconds super armor with just one press of a button, and with proper affixes which you will mostly run, you will have at least 11 seconds of super armor. That's a very long time in fights, and no one, as in no one, there's no class that can contest you when you have this skill at all. Everything needs to run away, and the best part is that you can't, like, you don't need to do anything mechanically challenging, as a Blasphemer Seer is the easiest class in the game. That means I just press one button and I get 11-second super armor, and I can do whatever I want. But yes, if you are gonna counter argue, but Demo, you can just kite this class. Remember, Guys, again, this is another argument that is quite invalid, at least when you're trying to convince me, because of the fact that this relies on the player skill, right? Our tier list is based on why it's strong because of how it's structured as a class and how good the skills are in terms of overall, not just the player skill. But of course, we are also including the player skills, but not to a complete basis, as it won't be a good structure for how to, explain and argue each and every individual thing that makes a class strong, which is why I am telling you guys everything right now. But yeah, to move on, I don't want to over explain. Uh, for Blasphemer Seer, right? So now that you have super armor, zeal, and its shapeshift, if you do utilize this correctly, right, all you have to do with not much, actually, maybe it's a stretch to say that, like, honestly, to be completely honest, you do not need little to no need except for movement, right? So I guess you can say there is a little mechanic into it, which is how you move and how you progress through the game in terms of just walking around, right, or running around. But that's like in the slightest way of what you can call mechanics, right? Super easy to learn for most of us. But yeah, uh if you are getting kited as a counter argument, that the fact is you can always just properly utilize these two skills, which makes it very strong and not as hard compared to other characters. And that's by fully utilizing these two skills, by using them on the right time consistently. And by knowing this as Blasphemer, you can achieve the way what a Shadowstrix does to you, so that you can keep permanently resetting if you just properly utilize these two skills. For example, if I get chased by someone, or if I start a fight on someone, right? Let's say I have to use my zeal and contest uh, the fight where you initially do as a seer, right? And then you try to get your dashes in, you have to try to hit him and get your mana. One more thing that I forgot to note that I will just add, this class does not need vitality, right? As it's the only class right now with its own slash original vitality, which is called mana. And every time you hit someone, you can get this mana very quickly, and you can literally have your skill up every 3 hits, 2 to 3 hits, right? You can just be dashing infinitely if you can hit people. And but let's say you do, you're human, you make mistakes, and they get to bait your zeal, and you're gonna be like, Demo, what do you do now, right? So in every fight, right, once you're out of zeal or almost out of zeal, simply enough, compared to other people's counterplay, all you have to do, right, we are basing on how easy it is to be played, which is why it's also one of the top meta characters right now, is you don't have to do much, you just have to run away. And when you run away, it's not like you're gonna die immediately. As it goes down, right, as your CDs go down, it's quite easy to like just move around and not die with your dodges. And even if you do, remember, we have this skill called Shapeshift. And when we use our Shapeshift, as you are running away and putting that distance, by the moment they catch up to you, you will have your zeal. And again, as I explained earlier, nothing can contest your zeal for 11 seconds. And even if you get chased by, let's say, that's one more thing to note, guys. There's not much people that can chase you, right? Like, I guess most of the classes that can and will be able to chase you is literally just Shadowstrix and maybe a Sorcerer, right? If they're properly utilizing uh what do you call this? Their speed skill. But again, that is just an issue in the game for player skill issue, right? We cannot completely be basing around like, okay, if he's just better and he just like waits for his thing. Again, that's an argument that we cannot be fully basing on, so it just becomes a skill issue. So let's say if everyone is properly using everything and the right hands, right, it will become a stalemate, right? So even if they chase you, as I'm continuing what I've been saying earlier, let's say a Shadowstrix like knows you're gonna ball and TPs to get closer to you. By that time, you will have Zeal for 11 seconds, and again, you'll be playing around that again until you have your shapeshift, and you will just do the same thing over and over again. So what makes these classes very strong, right? In combination, the main differences you will see why I keep saying these are the best classes or meta classes, right? Shadowstrix and Blasphemer is mainly because they have little to no counters in terms of chasing, and even then it's just a stalemate because it's just around each other, so it becomes a skill matchup, right? Because of how few, right, little to none counters, right, for running away, and mostly just counters for 1v1s, right? For example, Shadowstrix gets countered by a Merc 1v1, but doesn't necessarily counter you completely, right? As you can reset. So it really depends on how you think about counters, as this tier list is not about 1v1s completely, as the game is not about your 1v1s. And finally, guys, what is the bottom line of the situation? What is and or who is the better class? Is it Blasphemer Seer or is it Shadowstrix? So, to answer this question, honestly, for me, they're both just equally the best class right now, and this will only differ by the situation. And to explain more, is for example, Shadowstrix plays way better and counters Sorcerer way more compared to a Blasphemer Seer. Uh, the reason is because Shadowstrix has better dashes and is more mobile and deals way more damage to shut down a sword compared to a Seer who has to be more calculating and more safe in engaging a sword, because I don't have those specific dashes. But it doesn't mean that I can't deal with a sword like completely unplayable. I can, and you will still see Seers outplay Sorks, and it is possible. And you can always just run away. But yeah, the fact is, Shadowstrix have a better time fighting this class. And the difference is, I guess, aside from that, is for Blasphemer. And in 1v1s, in technical terms, Blasphemer is way easier to play versus Shadowstrix mechanically. And this makes it so that you are more likely to make more mistakes mechanically as a Shadowstrix compared to a Blasphemer, considering how easy a Blasphemer can play the matchup, because I can literally just press one button, and just walk up to you, and that's it. You are forced to make harder decisions compared to me, where, as I said, I would be making less mechanical mistakes because of how easy the class is. So I would say the bottom right now is, would I choose Blasphemer Seer as the better class because I can deal with Shadowstrix, which is the other top class, better in 1v1s? Or do I choose Shadowstrix as the best class because I can deal with my counter better as a Seer versus a Sorcerer? So yeah, in that situation, for me at least, it becomes a hard option to choose. So I would say they're both as strong right now. It just will depend on you and the situation, where uh what class is stronger in that moment. So yeah, guys, this will be the final positions for every class in the tier list. If you guys are satisfied, or if you guys are not satisfied, I would say, in the end, it is a tier list server meta will be different at the same time, and we're all on different servers. So yeah, I hope you guys learned a lot from what I've said though, from my explanations, and at least I've served as a good educational guide. And now, it's not over. It will be the ultimate tier list for a reason, and we will also be tackling on everyone's counters, matchups, to explain more and to give you guys more education, to learn, to even prove more credibility for this tier list, just to go all out, as I always keep telling you guys, I just want the best quality content for you guys, the most credible things that I can possibly offer you. So we will go above and beyond and even show you guys all the matchups and how it works, at least from my testing and my experience. So to start with, we will be starting with Mercenary Hammer. Okay, to just explain this chart real quick. Uh, all the class we have in reference, here will be the class that we'll be using for reference for its counters that we see here that I placed, and winning matchups and skill matchups. So I just wanna make sure, guys, just put this as a note that just because, for example, I have put some characters for counters on this chart doesn't mean that the class we're referencing to, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be just never gonna win these matchups. No, remember, guys, this is more so just something to base on, right? Because remember, there will be skill issue and knowledge issues in the game depending on who you're playing against. So you might be finding someone who's in the counters that you're always winning, or just winning because you are just either playing way better, or just the opponent not knowing what to do against your class, right? So let's keep that in mind. And for the same idea, wherein winning matchups doesn't mean you'll always be winning the matchup. It just means you have more advantage over these characters, because you can always get diffed by the other player if they are just better, right? Or if whoever makes a big mistakes. And for skill matchup, this is just more even, basically. The way you consider what classes I put in here is basically both sides have equal matchup, and you will equally just have to fight depending on how you guys play each other, more on just player skill issue, not because of what the other guy has, if he has something better. No, it's both equal for your class and this class that I put in this space. So yeah, hope that guys cleared up for you before I start. But yeah, starting with Hammer Mercenary, it has currently right now have no skill matchups, and instead we will be moving on to winning matchups, which is unfortunately for Withered Knight, you will be struggling a lot with this class, whether you're playing Knight Greatsword or Polearm, because of the fact that this class just spams super armor. And the main problem when you're playing Withered Knight, when you notice, is that every time you clash, for example, if you're playing Polearm, where you're using super armor with Polearm, that's the entire personality of the class, is that when you clash with a mercenary, you will always get stunned, because Mercenary Hammer has a trait where when you clash with him, you will get stunned if you're not a hammer mercenary. So you will just be losing every time, and you cannot play this class properly. That means you'll have to rely on very cheesy ways, like just spamming your javelin throw every time, playing super slow, right? You just can never fight this class, and it just becomes really hard. So either you just run away, or you just slowly whittle them off and just play in a cheesy way, right? It's not like you're winning the matchup, right? If you do slip up, they will just slowly kind of just walk over you. Not saying that they will completely walk over you. I think there is ways to if they play super slowly. But again, you are not playing your class properly, and you will have to like be very patient. And really good Merc Hammer players can just also just bait you in tight spaces where you can never fight them. It's a very niche matchup, but yeah, you will have advantage as a Hammer Merc versus a Polearm. And kind of the same thing with a Knight Greatsword, and kind of worse for a Knight Greatsword because of the fact that you don't really have much super armor, right? So you can't even contest uh any attacks, considering, right? He's just charging all over you, right? Even if you want to like bait some super armor when he's trying to do it, yeah, you don't have the right super armors to even try to bait with. It's just a very tough class, I would say, to fight Hammer with, because you're just gonna be relying on walking up to him and kind of like guess when he stops, like just timing like on the super armor, and that's just very hard because he has more leeway to choose when to release, which is why you will struggle a lot with GS and Polearm. It's just a very niche matchup for Hammer. And yeah, continuing on our counters, we literally have like pretty much the entire roster that basically counters you if they are played correctly. Starting with Mercenary Sword and Shield. Basically, you just get parried. Like if you're playing Parry Merc uh, with Stonebreaker, yeah, everything is parryable, and because of how slow it is, they can just literally just parry everything, and there's just it is what it is. As I say, it's pretty simple. They just parry everything. You're just gonna die. You're just gonna lose. If ever the parry merc will lose is, as I said earlier, if they're not knowledgeable, they don't know how to parry. Sure, you can cheese them, right? So it's just all about knowledge. And since we are on SNS, I also just want to explain one more thing from SNS. If you are playing the other variant where like you are just like LMB spamming, I think it was a sword tip, I forgot what it's called, but the other tree basically where you abandon parry and you just like have like a lot of dashes. I would say that matchup is similar to being a GS. It's also just very timing wise since you can't really contest hammer. So I would put that on a winning matchup too, I'd say. For a hammer, it's just really hard, I would say. It's either winning matchup or skill matchup if you have that, but I would say it's more for the hammer side. So just please remember that if you're using the other variation. And next up we have is Blasphemer Seer. So you're wondering, oh, okay, Demo, I think I can just stun him, right? What you told me whenever you're super armor. Yes, you can stun a Seer, but remember, you can't even try to hit me, because if you do try to hit me, right, after that stun, I can just keep spamming LMB. And, it's 11 seconds, and you won't have super armor all the time on all your skills because you do have cooldowns. So I can take hits and I can just keep matching and it doesn't really counter me. That's the sad part. And even then, if I make a big mistake, I can just run away and you can never chase me. So yeah, it's pretty simple, man. 11 second super armor. Yeah, I can just keep matching. If I make a mistake, I just run away, come back. It's pretty much just cooked, honestly, for Mercenary Hammer. So for the next one, for the next two things, actually, they're the same thing, Elemental, Stardust, and Sork. Yeah, you can't do anything versus ranged. As I keep saying, the class is just very slow, simple enough. You just die before you even touch them. That's just it. That's just the matchup. You're just dead. And for next one, Black Arrow, same thing with Stardust and Sork. Although it might be more playable because of the nerfs, right? They don't really one shot you, at least for Black Arrows. They do have to hit it a lot more compared to sorcerers, but still, it is very hard to make a mistake versus hammer. So yeah, it's still the same thing. You're very slow and they're very fast, and you will just almost always die if they don't make a big mistake. And for the next one we have is Shadowstrix, Dual Blades. Um, Pretty much the same thing. Very fast class, and you can't outmaneuver it. Although the difference is they're gonna come up in personal. Personally, I fought like I fought like some hammer players with dual blades, and you can struggle, as I said, if you're not knowledgeable on the timing. And yeah, it will be more possible for a hammer, at least compared to like range, to fight this class. But same thing as a blasphemer, if I get hit, I can just immediately run away and you cannot do anything about it, and I can just keep resetting until you literally just drop over. So yeah, really knowledgeable Strix mains will just time you out and wait for you to miss, and they can easily punish you with the dash attacks or like simple attacks. Yeah. And for next one, we have Revenant Seer. So for Revenant Seer, actually, it's it's not like this class is the fastest class or anything, but this class basically just fully counters well, not completely, right? Depends on the class, but like is very good against dive characters. And the problem is with hammer, right? Sure, I may not be able to stagger you completely, right? But you are still very slow. Remember that. And when a Revenant Seer gets dived, he puts everything down. He doesn't necessarily, right, have to be up close and personal to you. He can just easily kite you because, as I said, this class is super slow, and realistically everything will be dodged, right? And when you dive a seer, he will just keep his space and you will just die, right? That's just how the matchup works, at least from my knowledge of fighting it, and from collecting information from one of the best players for my region. But yeah, moving on to Shadowstrix Dagger. So for Dagger, actually, you're probably gonna be wondering, wait, Demo, Dagger's LMB kind of sucks. Why would it counter Mercenary Hammer? So it's not because of Mercenary. It's not because of the LMB that you'll be dying to this character. It'll be because you'll never touch this class. You know, it's basically a Shadowstrix too. And the only difference is maybe they're using Dagger. They're still gonna be using the skills for dual swords, but they're gonna be using daggers for LMB. And the problem is, right, they have a skill for the dagger, which you're also using when you're using dual swords, is that they have a skill that they can dash through you, and then a shadow follows and you will get stunned, and that goes through your super armor. So they will just keep doing that until they hit like a nasty combo and you're 1 HP. And even if you hit them as that same thing, it's gonna be the same class, just a different weapon. They're just gonna run away and you will never be able to touch them. Okay, next class we have is Black Arrow. So for Black Arrow, okay, starting with the skill matchups is Sorcerer, Stardust, Elemental, with both skill matchups. Although you can argue that yeah, they do one-shot you more, right? They deal more damage up front close, but Black Arrow, if they hit you with a barbed, you are pretty much game over, since you cannot dash unless you want to sacrifice HP or get stunned. Wherein as, you know, it's the same thing. If you are stunned and can't dash, you will literally just get shot for free by the BA, which makes it still a very playable matchup for BA, and it becomes a skill matchup as you're both ranged, right? So both classes can't mindlessly push each other, right? And the next thing we have is a Revenant Seer. So it is a skill matchup because similar to the idea of Sork, you are both ranged and you cannot mindlessly just dive a Seer, and a Revenant Seer cannot just mindlessly dive a BA, right? Because of barbed arrow and both range. Pretty simple. Next thing we have is Blasphemer Seer. So for this matchup, right, it's a skill matchup. Mainly because that even if you hit the barbed arrow and the Blasphemer Seer, they can just press their ball and your barbed arrow won't really do anything because I'm not dashing, right? And you can kill a Blasphemer if they make a mistake. I mean, you know, as per any other player. But yeah, they can just run away and reset every time. Uh, and honestly, I'm very tempted to put it as a winning matchup or like a counter for BA, just because you cannot chase me at all as a BA. BA has zero movement to chase anything in the game. You're more of like a person who will shut down people from running away, and the fact that Blasphemer you can't really shut down to run away is a big problem. but a really good BA can still hold their ground versus Seer. So I would say it's more of a skill matchup. But honestly, you can argue, and I also think, uh, depending on how good you are, I would say you basically counter a BA as a Blasphemer Seer. But I guess for the sake of the majority, let's just say, we're just basing on the majority right now. I think it's safer to place it for as a skill matchup for now. But yeah, you can't argue. Just take a note that it could be a counter depending on how you play Blasphemer Seer, because it could be the difference between your skills as well. But if you are using my skills, I would say Shapeshift and Sigil. I would put this for counters. And the next thing we have is Shadowstrix Dagger. So this one's interesting. Shadowstrix Dagger is a skill matchup and not a counter. You can argue they can one-shot you, but you can hear a Shadowstrix Dagger when they come close to you, and it's not the easiest to hit the stuns. But if they do hit the stun, you're kind of cooked as BA. But yeah, if the BA is very aware, and usually most BA players are aware, and they play safe distance and positioning, yeah, they are always just ready to counter you with their barbed and other utility, which makes it pretty even between classes, both of these classes. And the next class we have for winning matchups now is Mercenary. So I don't think this is a secret, right? We talked about this earlier. Yeah, BA counters Mercenary, and most of the time you should win this matchup because of the fact that Mercenary struggles with closing in the gap, and you have a lot of utility as BA to push people away and stop their movement, and it just makes Mercenary look very weak when you do fight it as a BA. But I do wanna give you guys some notes. There is another variation that we talked about just now, right? Remember the sword tip, like the other tree that you abandoned Parry, where you can have more dashes. If the mercenary does have that variation of talents instead, you are basically getting countered as a BA because that counters ranged. But we'll be talking about that later, because we do have like something ready for that too, for this chart. But yeah, anyways, if you are playing Parry Merc, you will be countered. And for the next one, we have Hammer. Hammer is the same thing, very slow class. We've talked about this enough, so I won't be like explaining too much. But yeah, you're very slow. You can't really hit anything. BA just abuses that, so you are just hard losing that matchup. And for uh Wither Knight, actually, so here's the thing. Um, I would actually argue Wither Knight is probably a skill matchup, right? Because you do have really good dashes for Wither Knight. So I would actually just put this to skill matchup right now. As I just was really thinking about earlier, where should I place it, either winning or skill matchup. But from what I seen, BA versus GS really heavily relies on how good the Wither Knight is. If he can block your arrows so he can close the distance, and he does have like a right click hold dash, but the problem is BA can easily shoot you while you're holding that. There is a lot of situations where you can play around positioning too, so it becomes a bit of a gray line. But I think the safest you can say is a skill matchup, and yeah, it's mostly gonna be the player's skill issue. So if the player is good enough, or like above average, you could put it in winning matchups or skill matchup. But just for the sake of being in the safer side of majority, I think it should be a skill matchup. And yeah, for our counters, we are getting hard countered by Shadowstrix, as this class just literally counters every range class too, because of dual blades, of how fast it is. Yeah, you just deal a lot of damage, you have a lot of dashes, you can't be chased, right? You have a TP that doesn't need a dash, or even you get barbed, you can just TP away. Insane class to counter BA. And then we have Weird Knight Polearm. So for this class, actually, I was arguing to put it in skill matchup, but I have seen and I have used this class myself. You just need to be really aware with this class, and you need a lot of hours. It's not more so a player skill issue. I mean, it is a part of it, the player skill issue, but I am not basing it on that completely. But if this class is played right, you are basically countering range because of how many dashes you have. You know, same thing with Shadowstrix, right? We're gonna be comparing the same thing with Shadowstrix. You have a lot of dashes and a lot of reach. The only problem is it's kind of hard to hit that. But yeah, this class has always been a hard class. I have seen, and most of the time, in my service at least, you should be playing well against BA. But yeah, let's just say it's not a big counter. Let's just say like it's an average counter for BA, just because of the fact that yeah, it is a very hard class, but nonetheless, it should be a counter. So for the next class we have is Elemental Sorc and Sorrow Sorc. We'll just be placing them uh, at the same time because they're initially the same versus other characters. But yeah, I'll just like put this out. Uh, early Elemental Sorc does counter Sorrow Sorc, and you know vice versa. You get countered by Elemental Sorc. So if you guys want to just like know what's better, Elemental Sorc is better in a 1v1 versus Stardust. But yeah, moving on to skill matchups, we have Black Arrow. So Black Arrow is a skill matchup, as I explained just now with Black Arrow. Pretty much, you're both range, so I won't be over explaining. Versus Dagger, it's a skill matchup, and the reason why I say it's a skill matchup is because it just heavily based on both people's mechanics. If you can somehow shut down the streaks before he can run away after resetting, if he misses his combos, you can put him down. But if the streaks somehow gets you into a one-shot combo and gets your HP close to half or even dead, he can easily finish you up. So it becomes a skill matchup in that regard. For Withered Knight Greatsword, kind of the same thing with BA that I explained earlier. Unironically, the block becomes very decent versus Storks because they can, even though if the block isn't working, they can just uh, block everything, right? Even if the parry block isn't working, rather, right? So if you do hit that, they gain a lot of energy, and you know they can just use the parry to like close the gap, and you basically count that as a dash. So like you don't want classes to be doing that to Sorks, but it is not the most craziest thing, so it just becomes a skill matchup. And for our winning matchups, we have Revenant Seer. So the problem is, for Seer, for Revenant Seer, is that when you see a Revenant Seer as a Sorc, or when a Seer, yeah, as I said, sees a elemental Sorc or a Starter Sorc, it's just a fight where like you will just get outbursted, right? And it's a ranged fight. Seer does not have enough burst damage to actually fight a Sorc, because Sorc is supposed to be bursting harder than a Revenant Seer, as you know it was designed that way. So the way you lose this matchup, if you're using Revenant Seer or if you're against a Seer, the way you win this matchup is you are literally just out damaging them and outranging them. They just have better CC than you at the same time, and yeah, you're just losing this matchup as a Revenant Seer because of mainly the damage and the AoE difference these classes have. And for the next one, we have Blasphemer Seer. So you are technically winning this matchup uh, if played correctly with the right skills. I will have to say though, as a Blasphemer Seer, you can still make it very even depending on what you use, because there will be some new builds or other builds that maybe Elemental will use, right? and it will be much easier for them to fight you. Let's say if you're going Flame Blade or something, or like full melee melee build Sorc, right? Not the traditional Sorc, like you have like Stomp and then Flame Blade. You can actually play way better against that because they have to go up close and personal, and I just have to press my super armor and you just perma stagger them. So in those cases, it is a skill matchup and not a counter. But like with Stardust, right? With Stardust and Fireball, if they play their range, just spacing, it should be more of a counter if they play around that. So yeah, just keep that in mind. It could be skill matchups depending on what they use. But yeah, I think for the most for the most builds they have, it should be a winning matchup. And the next thing we have is Mercenary uh, Parry. This is for the Parry version. I just want to say this as a note early so I won't forget earlier, so you guys know that we'll be explaining later too anyways, but just in case, uh, if you are playing the non-parry version, the W key version with a lot of dashes, you will be able to counter range, right? So it won't be a winning matchup for Sorc. But for parry, and this is the most meta build for Mercenary that you will most likely see more, right, is the parry. And for parry, it just struggles really on chasing people, right? Uh, very simple explanation. Can't chase you, and you can just kite forever, and you just have so much damage with Sorc. Even if they try to like get close to you, the moment they get close to you, they should already be like 1 HP, like, right? Or they will just like lose the trades because they have to like waste their dashes and everything. Just very tough range matchup for Mercenaries. So Sorc does win this matchup most of the time. And I hope I don't have to explain as much again. Mercenary, you will be seeing like, yeah, every like legit 90% of the roster just wins Mercenary Hammer. So I hope I don't have to explain this as much. Just low weapon. Yeah, so moving on to counters. Strix counters every range class, so yeah, you are getting countered by Strix. They just one-shot you, and yeah, even if you have good CC, right, they will drop you faster than you can drop them, unfortunately, and they're way more versatile because they have way more dashes. That means it's way easier for them to dodge you and way easier for them to punish you. So yeah, it's just pretty simple. They just outdo you in all ways combined. And for Revenant Polearm, okay, this again will be the same thing as VA. In technical terms, you are similar to Shadowstrix while you counter them. You have more dashes and, blocks, and you can negate a lot of damage from the sword. But I guess, yeah, it is a hard class. But in the upper echelons of things, in the same level, if both characters are played evenly, you should still be a counter matchup, right? Uh, So yeah, moving on to the next class, we have Shadowstrix Dual Blades. So for Shadowstrix, if played normally in the meta, with our skill matchups, yeah, Blasphemer Seer is a skill matchup. Yeah, as I explained on the tier list, it's a very strong class, and you are basically the same. So yeah, skill matchup, whoever just better wins. For Withered Polearm, it's the same. In terms of 1v1, right? I guess you can actually argue putting this as a winning matchup, honestly. You should be technically countering this class, but just for the sake of majority and because of 1v1s, right? We will put it in a skill matchup for that regard. But if we're talking about like overall matchup, it should be a winning matchup for the streaks just because you can always just run away and reset. But initially, in the initial 1v1 fight, it should be a skill matchup as they can properly block your attacks and tank a lot of damage, and they have a lot of dashes too to counter your dash, which makes it a skill matchup. But yeah, just remember, this is a winning matchup if you do just run away and reset. So please just keep that in mind. For Revenant Seer, I would say it's also the same for Wither Knight. It is basically a skill winning matchup for the Shadowstrix if you just keep running away. But yeah, if it's just as I said, same thing with Polearm, 1v1 initially, it is a skill matchup. But yeah, this is just how strong the class is that I have to point this out, right? If you are resetting, it is a skill matchup, or winning matchup rather, for Shadowstrix, because yeah, you're not necessarily contained just to stay in one fight, right? This is no honor fight thingy, and people will do everything they need to do to win fights. So if they are resetting, it's a winning matchup for Streaks. If it's just a 1v1 initial, it's a skill matchup. So for Wither Knight Greatsword, yeah, it's just the same thing again for these classes. For the 1v1s initially, you can win, you know, depending on how good you are as a GS Withered Knight, because that's just the class's personality melee-wise, so it is a skill matchup. But if they just keep running away, as I said, it will be a winning matchup for the Shadowstrix swords. But yeah, same reasoning behind the other classes that I mentioned. Um, so you're gonna be wondering, so why did I put Mercenary as a counter if it can do the same thing? If Shadowstrix can do the same thing on Mercenary? Well, actually, guys, yeah, I will point to that right now. Uh, the reason why I put it in counters mainly is because you are technically, compared to other classes, you will win more 1v1s even if they come back all the times, because you technically just have an easier time fighting them. But yeah, if they keep running away, in all honesty, right? If we're not, again, if we're not talking about the 1v1s, this is a winning matchup for the Shadowstrix just because they can legit just come back until you have no heals and you just lose a battle of attrition, right? Because at some point, you're gonna make, they just need you to make one big mistake, and if you're low HP, they will just run you down, right? But you know, for the sake of majority, and let's say, right, you are playing things well in your 1v1s, I would say a really good mercenary can hold their ground most of the time. And if they do, it is a good counter 1v1 wise. Again, do not forget, if they are running permanently, right, and they're the same way as you and they're good at running away, it will become a winning matchup for the Shadowstrix. But yeah, moving on to our Blasphemer Seer. Withered Knight Polearm is a skill matchup for 1v1, and again, I just want to re-explain, you know, for people skipping, if if you are considering just 1v1s, it is a skill matchup, but if you are considering me being able to run away over and over again, which I can do the same thing as Streaks, it will be a winning matchup for the Blasphemer Seer, so please put that in the winning matchup, you know, just so we're clear. And for Shadowstrix swords, this is the only thing actually that's like a real skill matchup, because yeah, they can also just chase you if they properly use their TP to chase when you are balling. So that is a skill matchup, right? So that's fine. And for Revenant Seer, yeah, this is a winning matchup for Blasphemer Seer. Again, if I consider just like running away all the time and resetting. But for 1v1 sakes, right? Yeah, it is pretty hard to dive a Seer if they played properly, because they are anti-dive for melee, and for everything else, they cannot be that dove like easily. So you will struggle if they place their wards properly with the right utilities and kite properly. It will be still matchup. But yeah, please remember, guys. Yeah, I have to keep telling you guys, you know, for you guys not to forget, it's all not all about 1v1. So Vivo places a winning matchup if, you know, the Blasphemer is just like perma resetting, okay? And for that Greatsword, same thing. You guys, you know, just I will keep saying this just for the sake of uh you know, being sure for everyone, so no one misses everything. Same thing, 1v1, it will be skill matchup, but yeah, if you are playing really well and the Blasphemer just decides to run, it will be a winning match for the Blasphemer Seer winning matchup, okay? But yeah, moving on to the Mercenary SNS, same thing as we applied for the SS. So if you did skip to the Blasphemous here, please go back and read what I said for the SS, so that you know what I'm what I'm trying to say is gonna be the same thing. If you guys want to just like clear it out in your heads, but basically, you know, just to re-explain, you know, um, you are losing to a SNS 1v1 because they can parry everything, but it just becomes a battle of attrition. Again, if the Blasphemer just keeps running away, it becomes a winning matchup for the Blasphemer Seer. Okay, but you know, as I keep saying, for the sake of 1v1s, sure, it does counter you, right, in technical terms for 1v1, but if I run away all the time until you make a big mistake, it's a winning matchup for the Blasphemer Seer. And I guess the only real counter, the only real counter I would say right now is Elemental and Sork, because they do have a speed skill where they can chase you once you ball. So if they do utilize this correctly, you can get chased and you can die. But if both players play equally, it can become a stalemate. But it's still a counter because you cannot win their 1v1s if they play correctly because of the CCs and spacing they have. Unless, as I explained earlier, unless they have certain skills, certain builds that they play for elemental like Flame Blade and Stomp. If you're playing melee Sorcerer, it will be a skill matchup because you can just armor through like all those attacks and they have to get through you. But if they're playing the traditional range attacks and for spacing and Stardust, you will most likely struggle a lot more as a Seer because you have to dash and you don't have much dashes. It's more conditional where you have to hit them. So it is a counter for that regard. But yeah, remember, if they have the Flame Blade and Stomp melee Sorcerer build, it will become a skill matchup. Okay, for the next one, we have is Mercenary SNS. This will be for Parry Merc. So for Parry Merc skill matchups, we have Blasphemer Seer. Yeah, I'm not. It's never a winning matchup. It's only, as I said, if you go look up my Blasphemous here, but to re-explain, the reason why I put a skill matchup is because if they keep resetting all the time, you cannot do anything. But sure, it is a winning matchup if you can hold your ground, but you're not really killing the Blasphemer if they just keep running away until you die. But yeah, if we're talking about specifics, 1v1s, sure, it's a winning matchup. But because of the fact that they keep resetting, I'll put this in the skill matchup. Shadowstrix, same thing as Blasphemer, as we thought about Tierlist, so I don't want to over-explain. Same thing, Blasphemer, reset, sure, you can beat the 1v1s, but, you know, if they just keep resetting, it's a skill matchup. And for Revenant Seer, this one's interesting because actually you can put this on a winning matchup for a Mercenary SNS, but that would be taking things too far, and that's what I mean is like, sure, you might be able to come back and you can run away, but the problem is, as a Mercenary SNS with a parry, once you go in and dive with parry, there's really not much way of escaping. Unless you hit the shield bash, which is just very skill issue. So like once you dive in that Revenant Seer, most of the time you will be committing. And when you commit versus a Revenant Seer, when you dive in, you will take like a crap ton of damage. And they just have to place a ward and like CC you. Meanwhile, you have to do God's work to actually like hit them, and with their like insta heal, they have an insta heal and stuff. It's just very hard to touch them. So in all honesty, right, I've actually spoken to one of our best rangers that I know currently, and it could be a counter matchup actually. Uh, but since we just don't have enough information on how much people play this class yet, uh, from what I know, from what I've been told, and from my information that I've gathered, it's either a skill matchup or a hard counter. It's really depending based on how good the parry merc is at parrying. So yeah, it could be a counter, but safely for now to say, from my experiences as well, it is a skill matchup. So moving on to Withered Knight Polearm, we will be putting it as a winning matchup. As yeah, honestly, you just parry everything, and it's not like they have the craziest like movement to run away. No, you can chase them as a mercenary. Very possible to chase actually, because it doesn't really cover. It's not the fastest dashes as well, and they don't really have like a TP or anything. They do have a lot of dashes, but it is quite easier to chase a weak K in general, even if they have a polearm. Same thing with Revenant Knight. You just get parried. It's just honestly a hard counter. Like VK just has it very badly for Mercenary. It's just very tough. And Mercenary Hammer, yes, everything's parryable. They can't even run away because yeah, it's a very slow class. So you know you will just see this with a lot of classes if I haven't over explained enough. And for Shadowstrix Dagger, so here's the thing. I think it is right. If they're using Shadowstrix, they should be able to reset a lot. But if they're just using Dagger, the thing is, this Dagger is just very hard to hit. And normally, even as a mercenary paramark, even if you can't chase them, they just can never kill you because of the fact that it's just a very niche build and it's just very hard to hit. Like, you're gonna hit like your skills versus a guy who's very knowledgeable, like or like just plays averagely, like you can really react to the stun very well. But let's say let's say this guy is just very crazy and he knows all the combos of dash attacks and just becomes really annoying. Sure, you can argue it can become a skill matchup because they can just keep resetting forever. But I'm just gonna be placing it in a winning matchup because yeah, you in the end, bro, like it just makes more sense for people to shadow trick swords and people don't usually use dagger, but sure you can argue skill matchup if they play super omega well, but yeah, because of how hard dagger skill shots are to hit, we'll be putting it on a winning matchup. And for the next counters we have is, yeah, we've talked about this with BA and Sork earlier, so I hope I don't need to over explain. But just to like summarize, these guys are range classes. It's very hard for you to close in as a merc, and it's way easier for them to punish you going into them if you're not abusing positioning. And in general, right, just walking up to them is a really hard thing to do. So you are countered by all these range classes like naturally. And for the next class we have is Withered Knight Polearm. So we have Shadowstrix swords as a skill matchup. And if you did watch my 1v1 explanation earlier, yeah, 1v1 wise, it is a skill matchup, but this is basically a counter for Knight Polearm if I keep resetting right as a Shadowstrix. So just please keep that in mind. I'm sorry for the people just watching the entire thing and not skipping. I have to re-explain this for the people who are like, actually just skipping. So, just to be clear. And next we have Revenant Seer. Yes, this is a skill matchup. Once you do go in with Withered Knight Polearm with your dashes, you might not have enough dashes to like run away, and you're not like the fastest to run away, right? So they can keep up with you. So you really have to be smart when fighting a Seer. But at the same time, Seer also has to be aware of you because you have a lot of dashes and you can catch your dashes, and if you do hit them, you will still deal decent damage. And you can, since you have like some good dashes and AoEs, right, you can kind of break the ward pretty easily and kind of make it so it's a skill matchup for Revenant Seer. But this could be a counter, right? It's just heavily dependent, right? Because the Seer right now is we don't have much information with this class. So technically speaking, if the Seer just plays it very well at the same time, but it is killer true, so this is why I'm not putting a counter, because it's not a good base. You just like say per skill issue, right? So it is just safer to put on a skill matchup for now. So the next thing we have right now is Withered Knight Greatsword. Yes, it's the counterpart for Withered Knight's weapon, other weapon. Yeah, it is a skill matchup. But I will have to say, honestly, because of how my dashing works and my block works, you have little to nothing to counter my super armor, except for that one super armor, 3 slash skill, and the block. And even then, those have cooldowns, right? So if you're only using Greatsword, you can slightly say Polearm is better, so it could be a slightly winning matchup, but just ever so slightly. So it will still depend because like if you're both of the same class, it's both hard, so it just becomes a skill matchup in the end. So we will just be placing that in a skill matchup. And for our next weapon we have is Dagger Shadowstrix. So yeah, if you guys heard what I explained, pretty much the same thing from last time we explained about Dagger. It's pretty hard to hit the skill shots for Dagger, right? Very, very conditional. So like, even if they run away a lot of times, you'll be reset the moment they come back to, or you come back to the polearm. So yeah, it's not like they're very tanky too, and like a lot of like armor to just like potentially just like forever like keep you at bay in the entire game. So it's like not a crazy like weapon honestly. So it will just be a skill matchup, right? Like they'll just keep resetting, wasting your time. It just ends up so like you're just both wasting your time. And the next thing we have is Blasphemer. Okay, so for this class, same thing with Shadowstrix, guys, I explained earlier. This is counter, right? So if I keep resetting as a Blasphemer here, you can't do anything about it as a Withered Knight. So you will lose this, right, in that regard for resets. But if we're strictly speaking about 1v1, it is a skill matchup, right? So for the sake of that, as I keep saying, we put it in a skill matchup, but just remember, if I fully reset over and over, it is a counter. And yeah, same thing applies for Mercenary SNS. The reason why I just like put it for... Okay, sorry, no, never mind. That's what I meant. I got a bit confused there, but yeah, for Mercenary and SNS, we have it full counter for Revenant Polearm, because yeah, you can't really outrun this class. Same thing with what I explained with the GS is that yeah, you do have a lot of dashes, but it's not enough for you to outrun this class. And if you legit just get parried, you're gonna get stuck in this circular motion where like it just never ends of you getting chased and tech chased and with a shield bash, right? So yeah, you just can't even win this class at all, honestly. Like Mercenary is in this and Polearm, as a Withered Knight, you just get hard. It's your hardest counter. It's the most unplayable counter I would say in the game right now. Like if you're playing Withered Knight versus Mercenary, like it's just very sad. And another niche thing is that you are actually also discounted by Mercenary Hammer. It's pretty sad, bro. Like most of the Mercenary things just counter you. It's just very sad for BK to fight a Mercenary. So yeah, and the reason is because for Hammer, right, as I explained at the start, is that you just keep smashing your buttons for super armor, and you do just get stunned as a Withered Knight, and there's nothing you can do. Like you have to play super weirdly, cheesily, and it just if the mercenary just starts like playing hugging a corner, he's just it's just gonna be a very long match, and you're both gonna be wasting each other's time because you're not like a class who can play versus its skill sets properly with your mechanic, with your stun mechanic, with the hammer. But yeah, moving on, we have Revenant Seer. So for Revenant Seer, right? We'll be putting Shadowstrix swords as a skill matchup. But I've talked to people, and from my experience at the same time, is that what becomes right for Revenant Seer is that you can't really chase anyone. And same thing, right? For you're gonna see most of my logic is that Shadowstrix can just always reset, same with Blasphemer, right? And if I just keep resetting, eventually you will make a mistake as a Revenant Seer as well, and you will just die. So you want to consider this as a winning matchup, as I said, as I keep saying, rather in for matchups, right? For resets, this will be a winning matchup. But yeah, for the sake of 1v1s, it is a skill matchup. Uh, BA, now this is a real skill matchup. So BA can't really like dive you, right? It's not a diving class. And even if you do hit your barbed, right? It's not like the seer has to dash away. If you come a bit closer, you will get cooked by the Seers every CC and wards. But at the same time, you know, Seer can make a mistake, and you know, with the utility of BA, you can still make it possible that you dive after a barbed arrow. So it just becomes back and forth, and you know, whoever's just better lands their shots mostly wins the skill matchup. And then we have Mercenary Parry. So for Mercenary Parry, right? Yeah, you can argue it's a winning matchup for Revenant Seer because you will not have escapes once you dive in as a mercenary, as I explained earlier. But yeah, this heavily depends on how good the mercenary parries. So yeah, you can argue both, whether it's a losing matchup for winning matchup for Revenant Seer or a skill matchup. Yeah, the problem is the class is just really dependent on parries, and you know that's just the one of the special cases where we actually kind of have to base on a little bit for the player skill issue. But yeah, you can argue winning matchup, skill matchup for Revenant Seer. We'll just be putting in a skill matchup, right? For safety for the majority. And next thing we have is Blasphemer Seer. So yeah, same thing with Shadowstrix. This will be a winning matchup for the Blasphemer Seer if I just keep running away. But yeah, for the sake of 1v1s, we will be putting it a skill matchup. You know, because I dive, same thing, I dive, I can make mistakes, don't really have a way to get out. But I mean, not really a way, but you know, if for 1v1s, right? Let's say I commit even with my shapeshift, yeah, it's a skill matchup. But, you know, if I just want to run away, winning matchup, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, next we have Withered Knight Polearm. Yeah, I would say this is more of a real skill matchup, as yeah, the Withered Knight needs to be smarter with how he handles his dashes, because if he over dashes and has no vitality when he dives you, you can kill a Withered Knight. And if you don't dodge a Revenant Seer, if they play Withered Knight very well and chase all your dodges, you can also die as a Revenant Seer. So it becomes an actual real skill matchup in that regard. And for our winning matchups, we have Mercenary Hammers. So it's just very terrible, honestly. If you fight a Revenant Seer as a Hammer player, you are hella slow. And if the Seer is just literally like not knowledgeable and he doesn't know the matchup, that's the only way you'll win, is if he makes a big mistake, or you know, he just doesn't know what you do. But yeah, in proper fights, T will just dodge everything, and once you commit with Hammer, you are just kind of cooked. So it's just a tough class, a tough weapon, you know. So for next we have Shadowstrix Dagger. So yeah, we'll be placing this on a winning matchup for Seer, just because of how hard, as I keep saying with Dagger, it's really not hard to uh dodge the skill shots, and like once you go in and get close, usually that's what you want to do with a dagger, right? You're gonna have to use two of your dashes, so in that point of time you can and might make a mistake, and you might get just cooked by the Revenant Seer, and it's just harder for you every time, even if they reset, if you're just using dagger, right? It could be the Seer could hold the entire game, and if you're not using dual blades, it's just very tough for you. It will just be a permanent reset for both, which is why it's a winning matchup. But you can argue, sure, it's a skill matchup. You can slightly argue, but Dagger is just so weak, like because of how bad or like how much you have to rely on just hitting steel shots, or just really easy to dodge for Dagger. It's like it's very tough. That's why I put it on a winning matchup. But yeah, as I said, you can argue on skill matchup. But yeah, moving on, we have Withered Knight Greatsword. So yeah, for Withered Knight Greatsword, yeah, you don't really have any escapes for this class. You go in, once you dash in and commit, there's no way for you to go out after diving a seer. So yeah, you pretty much don't even want to dive a seer as a Withered Knight, because you're just gonna get cooked. Even if you have your block up, they have a ward that just like automatically shoots you, and you're gonna have to choose between the ward and the seer and all the CC they put you through, and having just a block is just not enough to like fight a Revenant Seer. So it's just a very tough matchup for you. So Revenant Seer will be winning this matchup. And then for our counters, based from my information, all from the people we talked about too, and from my experience, you are just getting nuked by a sword. Yes, there's this difference between a BA and a sword, right? Not only because its range is that you deal way more damage than a BA, that's why it counters you. And the AoE, you just die, honestly. Like your range and your damage is limited as a Revenant Seer, right? You're mostly like anti-diving, but the problem is a sword will never really dive you. They can just play their range and they would just outburst you and out AoE you, and because of that, like just raw fact, you are just losing like class-wise, like because of the skills and just the stats of the damage. That's just it. The class just like is just better than you in ranged, and you are not really much of a range character for a seer. In this regard, you're more of like an anti-dive character. So yeah, if you fight a class that has just ranged and damage, you're just really not doing anything, right? So you get countered by sorcerers as a Revenant Seer. And then next we have is Withered Knight Greatsword. So starting with Shadowstrix swords, as I always explain, guys, yeah, in a 1v1, sure, it is a skill matchup, but if I keep running away, this will be a hard counter if I just keep running away on the Knight Greatsword, right? Because I can just fully reset as a Shadowstrix. For BA, this is a true skill matchup. Because you do have a lot of dashes with Wither Knight, and with all the nerfs for BA, you can't really get staggered as much anymore. So when you do try to commit with Wither Knight Greatsword with the dashes, depending on how good the BA is at aiming shots, and depending on how good the Wither Knight is hitting his shots with his dashes and closing up, it becomes a real skill matchup. And for the next one we have is Blasphemer Seer. This will be a hard counter, same as the Shadowstrix if you are resetting, right? Because we are in the same class, me and Shadowstrix, right? So if I am like just resetting, it will be a hard counter. But for the sake of 1v1s, as I always keep saying, Blasphemer, yeah, it is a skill matchup 1v1, but yeah, you will argue that if you're on, it will be a counter. And for the next thing we have is Wither Knight Polearm. So Wither Knight Polearm, yeah, as I've explained for the Wither Knight Polearm itself earlier when I was explaining it, pretty much, yeah, the main difference is I will have more, I will have more super armors, so you can still argue that it is more of a counter, but you are face to face to each other, and if you have the right outplays, it could be a skill matchup. But you can slightly say rather, and argue that it could be a slight counter, so you can put it here as a counter. But for the sake of you being the same class, so it is both hard classes. You both know what you guys are doing, so at the end of that regard, it is a skill matchup for both GS and Polearm because you are the same class. And for Knight GS, yeah, since you do have like a lot of dash attacks, and at the same time for Sork, actually, funnily enough, for the block, actually it works pretty well against the Sork because of the fact that you are blocking a lot of things from the Sork. You can block mostly everything from the Sork, and blocking that and getting the damage, even if you're not hitting the parries, that parry attack you can do in range and it becomes a dash basically. And as a Sork, you don't like things that has a lot of dashes because it shuts you down. And Wither Knight has a decent amount of dashes, and he also has a dash that he can just do forever, just holding his right click, right? So aside from skills, he has good the defensive capability versus Sork. So, even if it's not the craziest things, right? It's not like it's not like it's a counter. I would say it's more of a skill matchup because of how hard GS is. But honestly, in some points, you can maybe consider it a slight counter, right? Because of the dashes of GS. But yeah, because of how hard the class is right now, we're gonna be putting it skill matchup. Of course, this both works for Stardust and Elemental, as I've explained. And Yeah, we're gonna be putting winning matchup for Dagger. You can argue this is a skill matchup, but just because of how bad the LMBs are for Shadowstrix, Dagger is, right? Or like, compared to the dual blades. Yeah, I will have to be putting this as a winning matchup for the GS because you just get one-shotted, right? I think the more you try as a Dagger, the more dangerous it is for you as Shadowstrix Dagger because the knight can just one-shot you, and you do have ways to shut it down. You do have, it's not like you're completely using the GS as well, depending on what they have. Like if they usually have Javelin, right? You will be like thrown into a wall while you're trying to TP, right? If they don't let you breathes, and it's just tough as a Dagger. Like it's just very conditional to those skill shots. But like, let's say you're just like the GOAT or of all time, you can argue it's a skill matchup, but just for the sake of that argument, at least for me, we're gonna be putting it as a winning matchup for the Over the Night Greatsword. And yeah, for our counters, Mercenary just cooks you honestly. You get parried by everything. Same thing as Polearm, everything gets parried. Your parry as a GS can get parried by a mercenary. It's that crazy. It's just unwinnable. Sorry. Sorry for that, but yeah, mercenaries hard counters you. It's just honestly very unplayable matchup for you. It's just very tough. You just have to do so much more, uh, to actually win the matchup. So yeah, it is a hard counter. And then the next we have is Mercenary Hammer. As I explained earlier, but to re-explain in short, this guy will just hold the super armor all the time, and as a GS, there's not much for you to do because they will stun you even with one of your few super armors, and then you have to guess much more when they're gonna release. And it's just harder for you to choose compared to a Hammer, who can like go on his way and choose the fight on how it goes for himself better compared to a GS Knight. And for the next one we have, for the last one, is a Revenant Seer. Yeah, as I talked about earlier, for the Revenant Seer as well. And to re-explain, once you go in as a GS on a Revenant Seer, there's just nothing for you to do. Once you commit on those dashes, right, you are stuck in that place with Revenant Seer. So either you hit all your hits, or you just get bursted down, and you just die. And most of the time, it's just easier to make mistakes because it's a hard class. It's easier to make mistakes compared to Revenant Seer, which is why it just counters you a lot more when you get dive, because Revenant Seer is a dive counter, anti-dive class. And then we have Shadowstrix Dagger. So for Shadowstrix Dagger, you're gonna see okay, for Shadowstrix Swords, honestly, bro, this is even a skill matchup. You know what? It's not like I put it here, I guess. I was thinking about it earlier, but like honestly, it is a counter matchup because, yo, let's be real. If you fight a guy playing dual blades, they're both using dual blades and dagger. If you're only using dagger, you're just getting cooked by that, honestly. Yeah, let me just like re-put that there. Uh, on for counters for Blasphemer Seer. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's the same thing. Sure, you can argue because you can both reset, right? Slightly, that's the skill matchup. But in the end, you're not even using a dual blade, so it's even harder for you, right? It's even harder for you. Sure, you can like hit through my super armor, but even after that, you can't really contest me. You have to run away after doing your damage to me. Like, there's so many just conditions for you as a Shadowstrix Dagger to actually make it or even call it as a skill matchup. So it is also just gonna be a counter at this point, honestly, the more I think about it. And for Elemental Sork, okay, so for these two things, it is kind of special for Sork, right? Because you can one-shot them and you can clean them up quite easily once you're low HP. So it is a skill matchup. If the Sork messes up and gets hit by one stun, you kind of just one-shot him. If the Elemental Sork is more capable or like more aware, he can one-shot you too as a dagger. So kind of goes both way, at least for that regard. Same thing with Black Arrow, same thing with the Stardust. Their range is just very squishy. So same idea for them. And for Withered Knight, Greatsword, yeah, honestly, you can say this is a counter as well, depending on how it is. Like as I explained for the GS earlier. But yeah, you can't argue because of the fact that yeah, Dagger can just reset permanently. So in that regard, I think it's still a skill matchup, I guess. But sure, you can put it as a counter if the GS is playing really well. But I think yeah, it's just safer to put it as a skill matchup. And for Polearm, same thing, same idea with the GS. Very hard class, and you do have to hit everything, and even if you hit him as a dagger or both sides, it's most likely just gonna be a reset. He's quite tankier than usual class as well, and your combos have to be precise. As I always say with dagger, it just becomes tough, and in the end, it just becomes a skill matchup, even if you keep resetting. And for hammer, actually, unironically, I mean, you can argue it's a skill matchup, but like, the problem is with Hammerhead, it should be your one and only winning matchup in technical terms because of the fact that you will outrun him and he's super slow. He'll never be able to hit you usually, and you have a skill like you have like a mini dash that can stun over his super armor. So it is technically your only winning matchup for this class. And then we have Mercenary SNS as a counter. Honestly, for this one, it's kind of hard for me to put in the skill matchup, although you can slightly argue it. I personally wouldn't place it because, yeah, if you're not using dual blades, it's just very hard. Well, it will just forever be a stalemate if you're good at running away with dagger, and eventually, if the mercenary really just like pops off on his reads, you will just die. But you can argue you can do it with the same with swords, but the problem is swords I can actually fight you better with dual blades compared to dagger. But dagger, yeah, you just need to always fish for the combo, which is just way easier to dodge, honestly. Like it's just a bit more tough, right? But sure, you can argue skill matchup if ever because of the resets. But I think for me, I'll just be putting it as a counter because of how harder it is compared to dual blades. And for Revenant Seer, um, same thing. You do have to like waste dashes to go in as a dagger, and once you waste those dashes, even if you still have TP, if you get caught, it's just pretty much very unwinnable with a Seer. Like having his wards, and even if you get the combo, the wards will just keep hitting you, and the CC is just like tough. It's just gonna be like mostly even. Uh, it's just very hard with Dagger, man, if you're just relying on skills. And yeah, it is an anti-dive class, so it's even harder, which just makes it like a really tough counter for you. And then for Shadowstrix swords, as explained, you're basically using the same class, but he's using both, and he's using the meta dual blade, so you are just like losing that matchup, right? He's just using something that the build that's like way better than yours. And yeah, for Blasphemer, yeah, same thing. We're both resetting, but the problem is you're not using dual blades, so I can legit just like kill you much easier as a Blasphemer because you're not like using the best builds for Shadowstrix. And finally, for our last one, okay, this is a bit special, right? I did not rank this earlier for the tier list. This is basically the W key LMB mercenary. I didn't rank it earlier in tier list because I think, honestly, at least for my servers, people really don't play this class as much, or like this build rather, since it's just why would you choose it over like Parry? But let's say if you do play this class, if ever I would put it in a tier list, I would probably put it around viable B tier, right? Because of the fact that it doesn't play well against every matchup. If you are playing this class, the W key spam LMB mercenary, you're mostly trying to counter range matchups. So yeah, your 1v1s will be more fair, or more of a skill matchup, and you'll be focusing more on classes that's, you know, harder to chase, or like classes that you wanna, you know, just like get up close and personal as early as you can, because you know they're harder to catch in those initial fights if they are just kiting forever, which are range matchups. But yeah, starting with Blasphemer, with this build, it becomes a skill matchup. You can kind of combo them before they run away, before they die, but honestly, that's relying on like their big mistakes. So in the end, you know, this is still like a counter matchup. But yeah, but for the sake of 1v1s, we can say it's a skill matchup. If they're like just resetting forever, it becomes a counter matchup. Same thing with streaks, bro. 1v1, honestly, like if they screw you up one shot, they make one mistake, you're cooked as this build, since you can't really parry. And honestly, it's kind of harder compared to parry, so I don't even want to put this as skill matchup. I'm gonna put this like as a counter, like full counter. But like, you know, for the sake of 1v1s, you know, you can still dodge some things, and if you play around your dash attacks correctly, you can still do it. But yeah, if they just fully run away all the time, it's honestly just a counter as well. But yeah, for the sake of the 1v1 argument, we just put a skill matchup. Withered Knight, Polearm, pretty much the same thing. It is a skill matchup. Honestly though, I would put this as a counter because of the amount of because this class, right, Mercenary, if you if you just play LB build, you don't really have super armor, and he can just super armor through everything. So technically speaking, it's just a hard counter, honestly. Like you will just probably die if they keep bashing you with super armor, and you can't contest it because you don't have parry, right? So I would actually argue this is a counter, right? But you know, let's say you're, you know, I mean, for the sake of 1v1s, you can slightly, like in terms of like player skill issue, you can say it's a skill matchup, but you know, we can't be basing on that. So realistically, you know, if you're using this class, and you know, you don't really have super armor, you're not using parry, you're just using that WLMB blocking variation where the polearm has better like blocking, it really just does counter you, honestly. But yeah, moving on to Mercenary Hammer. So this is also quite tricky actually. Like since you don't really have super armor as well, it's kind of plays as a GS over a mercenary. It should also be a counter. It's actually very niche, right? You should get countered by the parry, by the Hammer SNS, because you can't contest like the super armor at all. They can just keep dashing. But if you do play it super slow, right, and just if you're very knowledgeable about about the moves, it is hammer. It's not like you can die as well because of how slow it is. So you're just, it becomes a stalemate, low key. You know, it's very easy to dodge hammer, and you can punish it. You can punish it rather, but like it's kind of tough because of how much they control, how much you can punish if they just keep spamming. You know, they have control, they have more control over like how it goes. So it is kind of a skill matchup, you would say, but it could be a slight counter. You can argue, but no, you know, I'll be placing the skill matchup just because it is hammer, it is very slow. So it becomes a stalemate where like you just both can't hit each other, basically. And for the next one, we have Withered Knight Greatsword. Yeah, I would say, yeah, this is it. This is a skill matchup. Um, you do have a parry with Withered Knight, but yeah, it is not really a crazy parry. You can dodge it, and it just becomes a sword fight. Honestly, like a raw sword fight most of the time. So yeah, it is gonna be a skill matchup because you do not have parry with this build. And yeah, for all these four, all these three at least, same idea. You will be playing the sword tip combo like the other three talent. If you're not playing parry, once again, if you are skipping to a lot, this is the non-parry build for Mercenary. This is like the dashing build and LMB spam build. This is mostly their counter range classes, so you should be winning more against range matchups if you do play this build. And I would say, yeah, Dagger will struggle a lot more too, right? Because, yeah, you are not playing the best version of like Dagger, right? So it's just easier to like shut you down as a merc that likes to chase more, like even with TP, because yeah, Dagger is very conditional. But you can argue to put this in skill matchup, right? You can argue that. And finally, for our counters, we have Mercenary. This is since I didn't have a picture, this is basically Parry Mercenary. This most people what most people will be using because it is the best meta build for it. So yeah, there's nothing you will do. You will just lose. You sold your soul to counter range matchups. You have to pay the price of never winning the better build, which is the Parry build. You're just like you're not gonna do anything. That's just it. He just parries everything, and you'll just watch him destroy you. And then for the next one, we have Revenant Seer. Yeah, same thing. Once you dive in, right, you are playing to like chase more. But just because you can chase more doesn't mean you have escapes. Once you dive in a Revenant Seer, you will just die, honestly. It's either you hit all your shots and it's more of like a gamble, right? On the dodges on the opponent. He has more control over you because he is a real anti-dive class, right? Revenant Seer is an anti-dive class, so you will just get cooked once you dive. Uh, so yeah. For Overnight Polearm, yeah, as I said, to re-explain again, right? He just has a better block, and you as this build, you are just blocking and just holding your LMB, and this guy has a better block with super armor, and Pede will just win you in contest over that all the time, right? So if you don't have the parry, if you're playing this build, this is how it's mostly gonna look like. But yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. Like, I put in so many hours of thinking on how to do this tier list, and so many in-game hours too, right? Since I played every class, I labbed everything on stream, off stream. But I am very happy finally that I'm able to present you guys a tier list that I'm satisfied with. Not just like something that I do just to clickbait people. Like it took me some time, and thank you guys for being patient with me. I hope you guys learned a lot. Once again, I want to say, we may not all have the same, opinions, and that's fine. You can watch the stream and have a different opinion. You know, uh, we respect it. I respect it, and different servers, different meta. So in the end, hopefully, at least for me, I'm giving you things that you can or have learned on my yapping sessions. At least hopefully that maybe you learned something. In the end, just for me. But yeah, once again, guys, thank you so much for the support, and because of you guys I just keep going. And please leave a comment, leave a like and subscribe on whatever you want to like uh tell me next on what to do if you guys are interested. And but if you don't want to, that's fine too. You guys are free to do whatever you want. And yeah, I just want to give my final like appreciation for you guys. Yo, thank you guys so much. I love you all, and you know, I'll see you guys in the next time. Peace out, boys.